But where it gets really, really messed up, he was starting to have these ceremonies where the women were being branded with the special symbol, like right next to their crotch. I mean, really, really close. And, when Sarah, my business partner, when she finally sent me a picture of her brand, I said, Jesus Christ, it's his initials. She was like, yeah. I woke up on the upside down thinking, oh, I thought this was the right way up. This is not the right way up. And so I flipped to the proper world and thought, What have I been doing? What have I been part of? My rage just went off. And it was like, I'm burn this motherfucker to the ground.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola.
And I'm Jonathan Rosales.
And this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're listening only and you want to see our faces, go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can like and subscribe, join in on the conversation in the comments. We love to hear from you. Today's guest, this is someone who you may or may not have heard of. He is an award-winning director, author, and podcast host of WTF is on My Mind. And you may have seen him on The Vow, a documentary about the cult NXIVM. So we are going to dive all into his story, what got him involved in this cult, and also everything that he's learned since then about cult leaders, cult behavior, and kind of dissect those things within his story. So welcome to the show, Mark Vicente.
Thank you so much. Great intro, by the way. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, well, you're a very impressive guy. So I appreciate you taking the time from your busy life, from jet setting all over the world, to come on Cults to Consciousness. We both really appreciate it.
It was great to talk to you guys. We have a very similar mission, I think. I just listening to you guys talk, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I care about too.
Yeah, I was listening to your episode, What is a Cult, on actually YouTube, beautifully produced, by the way. And there are a lot of points that I want to get into that I think some people may not have heard of. But first, to make sure everyone's on the same page and caught up, let's get into what NXIVM is, kind of a brief overview, and then we'll get into how you got involved.
Right. So the way NXIVM was portrayed was sort of executive business coaching. It was an organization that was started, I think, probably in the late 80s, I think, before my time. And the idea was to invite people to this organization, when it was formed, to help them, with business. But in essence, help them with like their emotional issues and productivity and that kind of thing. Something that, one of the co-founders said to me once I got there, they said, what we're actually doing is it looks like business coaching, but we're actually tricking them onto the path of enlightenment. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Oh.
So that's the way it was sold. And there were some things that were, pretty amazing about it, but a lot of stuff that was just very generic business stuff. But that was the cover. That was the front of it. Now, what was actually going on underneath, I mean, it was a high control group, and there was some very nefarious things going on, but that's what was presented to the world. So people would go for, business coaching or coaching with like issues they were having in their lives. And, they'd have this curriculum to work with, and they'd have coaches to work with. And there was also another level, which is like, if you really wanted to go deeper, you could become a coach yourself, and you sort of worked your way up to, the higher echelon, so to speak. And in essence, it was also like an MLM. There's a lot of shady stuff.
I was just going to say, it seemed like a self-help MLM.
Yeah, completely.
I think a big question is, how in modern times with the internet can cults even begin? And I think it's the self-help. That's how they start. It's people that want to do good, that want to be better people. They seek to find other people in the communities that want the same thing. How can I be a better person? Here happens to be a charismatic leader that is going to show us the way.
Right. And the one thing I say, I say that everybody that joins these kinds of things, the general, I guess, attribute is they're idealists. They want to make things better. Mm-hmm. Either they want to make themselves better or the world or whatever it is, improve something. And because we're not trained as a society to be able to sniff out, sociopaths and psychopaths, we're like, great, well, this sounds wonderful, because we kind of assume that they're like us, that they're people that have empathy, they're people that care. We make all these assumptions and we jump into something. In this case, I wasn't that personally interested in business coaching, but they had a particular pitch to me that was very, very compelling. And I'll get into that real quick. But, basically, I made this film called What the Bleep Do We Know? This was back in 2004. Well, that's when the film got released. And it was, it was a big splash. What I found out later is that they loved the film. And they started watching every sort of radio interview, every article, everything anything I was talking about, they were watching me. And they were trying to figure out, how do we get this guy? And they were having meetings, I found out later. Susan Dones, who actually left before we did, told me that they had weeks of meetings where they were trying to figure out, how do they get me? And she said, you didn't stand a chance.
Wow.
You didn't stand a chance. We researched you so carefully. And their approach was, they reached out and they said, look, all the things you talked about in your film, we actually do them. And at first I was like, yeah, that's what they all say. Everybody's reaching out saying, we actually do the thing that you're talking about in your film. But I had a meeting with Nancy Salzman, the second in command, and another woman, and it was a great meeting. And these women were very smart. And they really did understand what I wanted to do, which is, my passion was, I want to make the world a better place using media. That was my big thing. And they spoke my language. And now I understand why. They were mirroring everything I cared about.
Yeah.
So they, at one point, called me a few weeks after I met them. They called me and said, hey, listen, would you fly around the country with us? We want to meet some of the scientists that were in your film. And, they sort of landed in like a private Learjet and took me all over the country and basically led me to believe that they could help me make the films I wanted to make. They could help me with the resources and financing. Like, you're flying around in a Learjet with millionairesses and that kind of thing, you start to think, maybe they can help me, So that's the way they sort of lured me in. And then I went to take the education, finally. I was writing a book, I was doing a whole bunch of things, making another movie, and I went to take the education, and it really struck me because they did seem to have, I thought, some answers. And one of the things this was a really interesting trap. They said to me, you want to make the world better, right? I said, yeah. Okay. What are you going to do about all this anger and hatred you have for political leaders that do what you think is wrong? Like, how's that going to work? All this anger you have. And I was like, that's a good point. Who wants to build a better world, being a rageaholic? And they began to sort of work into my psyche, finding all these weaknesses. And, I was a pretty open guy. I mean, if somebody sat down with me in that context of a kind of a training and said, what are your fears? Where do you think you're weak? Where do you think you're strong? At that point, I would have told them, I did tell them. Now I'm like, well, I'm not fucking telling anybody anything. But back then I was kind of an open book. So they really, as I mentioned in that What is a Cult video, they data mined me, but they'd started much earlier. So they knew what I cared about. They knew what moved me. They knew what I wanted. They knew what my yearnings were. And they said, we can help you with all those things. And they said, it just so happens that our mentor who created this education is one of the smartest men in the world. Highest IQ ever recorded, yada, yada, yada. One of the top three problem solvers in the world. And there was actually a Guinness Book of Records that actually had him as the highest IQ in Australia, I think in 1985. Actually, it was in print, so
I wondered if that was true.
Yeah, I didn't bother to investigate. So I thought, that's amazing. So I'm going to have in my corner, helping me make projects that will truly transform humanity, I'm going to have this guy who's really, really smart,
Yeah.
And that was a big draw for me because I liked finding people that were smarter than me that could help me do the things that I could theorize but didn't know how to do. And the thing that was so profound was when I went to take the training, there were these perceptual shifts that I had that were so massive and so quick that I was like, shit. Okay, what if I could do this in a film? What if I could take somebody through a transformative shift in their perception, in their thinking, in their emotions, that they came out of a film and thought differently? And I thought, that's what I want. And so I said, well, I want to learn everything I can about this because if I can figure out how to apply this to filmmaking, like, I'm in. And again, I was only going to give it like a year, that turned into 12 years. So that was the draw for me, as I thought they had this technology, this tech, as they talk about in Scientology as well. They had this tech that could do extraordinary things for human beings, and they were demonstrating it on people and on me. You know, certain phobias and fears that I had were evaporating very, very quickly. I mean, rapidly, sometimes within under an hour. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
And that's something that I have a question about, because when I first started watching The Vow, and it's like the first episode, and I'm sure it's set up this way purposely, I was like, yeah, that's really cool. They're really doing a thing. They're really changing people's lives. And so for you to say that you had fears that would just go poof in a matter of an hour, do you think they really did have things that helped you? Or are you able to look back from your new perspective now and see, well, I don't know if that was exactly healthy, those perception shifts?
Yeah. I guess I have two answers. The one answer is, if you spend 12, 13, 14 hours a day introspecting, you're bound to have shifts.
Right.
And you're in this very concentrated environment where that's what you do, 12, 13, 14 hours a day. So anytime you're doing that, it would be profound. Some of the shifts that I thought I was having were not really shifts. They were more that I compartmentalized an issue into some corner of my psyche, and it seemed fine. It's like I repressed things. Or something was reframed. And the problem is, that's not really, trauma doesn't really get solved by just reframing something. It tends to be in the body. So, I would have panic attacks when I first went, and I thought that the panic attacks left. And then 12 years later, when I woke up, they were back. All the trauma was back. It had all just been waiting for me. Because in essence, what they did is they put the tech, so to speak, put a lid on a lot of emotions that needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
So I'd say a lot of it was compartmentalization. But again, just to go to my first point, when you spend a lot of time thinking about your thinking, cool stuff happens. But it doesn't matter, where you do that. If you go sit on top of a mountain on your own and you sit there and say, all right, Mark, who is this person saying, all right, Mark? Like, who is that? Is that me? Who's the real me? You're going to have amazing shifts. You don't need, a guru to take you through some process. You'll sit there and you'll be like, holy shit, I don't think I'm who I thought I was. Maybe I'm something else. Maybe I'm something larger. Maybe I'm something smaller,
Yeah.
But to be honest, I do feel a bit bitter about a lot of stuff still. So I probably don't want to acknowledge that there were certain things that
were helpful.
That I got out of it, Yeah, because all of the stuff is based on other stuff. There's a lot of useful stuff floating around,
Mark, I'm curious because you say that in the beginning you had a very quick perceptional shift, much so that it inspired you to want to make films where you can showcase that. You were in this cult for 12 years. Was the totality of the 12 years reflecting that amount of shift as in the beginning, or was it something that kind of waned over time and you were constantly looking for what you initially had?
I think it waned. And there were a lot of profound shifts that happened in the first few years. But then what happened is, as I got busier and busier, like Sarah and I were trying to, start, the center in Vancouver. And then we got the center going, and then the center in LA. And there was so much administration going on, and there was so many projects that I was trying to create. And one of the things that happens in any organization is when they see you're capable, they want to put you in charge of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you can do this, they want to put you in charge of this and this and this and this. And, then eventually they said, can you join the executive board? So I was so busy that I wasn't having time to really introspect in the way that I wanted to, unless you were going to some kind of intensive. But then again, it was very carefully crafted. These intensives were not truly designed to help liberate the real you. That's what they said they were doing. But they were trying to get you to a certain perceptual shift, a certain perception that they wanted. There was a moment I remember, it was probably the year before I left, where I said to Keith Raniere is the leader, was the leader, he's now in prison, where I said to him, we don't really help people get their dreams, and that's a problem. And he said something to me, he said, well, if you focus on all their dreams, then they're not going to want to be part of this. And I was thinking to myself, what?
He just showed his cards like that?
It was like, but what happens, when you're so entrenched in these things, these massive red banners fluttering in the wind go by you.
Yeah.
And you're like, did he say that? Wait, that, yeah. But then it's like, and we got to solve this problem. We got to do this. We can do this. And then it kind of fades away. It stuck there with me because later on, a year later, I was having meetings with all the staff, the upper ranks, and at one point I said to them, I want you guys to know that we're not doing what we think we're doing. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, we're not helping people get better. We're trapping them. And they were so upset at me. Some of them were confused. There were two that were very angry at me. And they said, that's not true. I said, it's absolutely true. People come here and they lose their dreams, you know? Wow. So there was a lot of weird awarenesses that were there, but I couldn't process properly. Because if you stop and really address a red flag in the middle of this weird, messed up, trauma bonded experience you're having with the cult, if you stop and address the red flag, everything falls apart. Your entire, what have I been doing this entire decade? That all falls apart. So I think what the psyche kind of does, or part of the psyche goes, that's really a problem. You'll deal with that at some point. Yeah. Until the dam bursts, then you're like dealing with everything.
I would love to get into what some of the red flags were that you can look back now and go, oh yeah, I ignored that, coupled with some of the things that make NXIVM a cult. So I'm sure people who aren't super familiar with the story are like, well, self-help, that doesn't sound so bad. But I would love for you to give them boots on the ground perspective of what it was like to actually be involved in NXIVM.
Yeah. You know, when I talk about the tech, I mean, you go in and one of the first things they say to you is that, you know, you're basically acting like a robot. You have all these unresolved things that are unconscious that need to be dealt with. They need to be brought up and dealt with because you're living a life in kind of automatic pilot. And you have all these fears that are driving everything, you know, and you have these phobias that are driving everything. And you have what they call these disintegrations, these misunderstandings of how reality actually works. And they also said, you know, you have this deficiency that's driving everything. You have this hole inside of you that is driving all your decisions, and that's why you make shitty decisions. And so they would kind of push you into this area. And what they call a deficiency was usually some feeling of lack, some insecurity, or some shame or something. And when you were in that, as they pushed you into that place, it felt terrible. It felt like absolute shit. And then like when you're in the midst of shit, they would say, you see, this is the problem right here. We have to resolve this, you know, and it may not take one intensive. It may take 3 or 4 or this higher level, whatever, you know. So there's this endless thing of having to mine your problems and your issues in order to get the thing you want to get. But eventually what happened is you spent all your time just mining your problems and mining your issues and basically feeling like I'm a terrible human being because I can't overcome these things. Yeah. That your self-esteem starts to go down and down and down and down and down. And everything was about, you need to be an ethical human being. And how are we going to make the world better if we're not ethical, if we're not moral, if we're not this, if we're not that, if we're not the other? And you people, you don't have ethics, you know, so we have to dig deeper to see what's driving you. What emotions are driving you to be unethical? And so if you're a person that believes in goodness, wants to be a good human being, and wants to make the world better, and you realize, shit, I'm in my own way, and therefore I'm in the way of making the world better, I am going to go in there and find everything that's wrong with me with vigor. And that goes on for years. And so you start to get broken down because you're constantly looking at everything that's wrong with you. Yeah. And eventually what happens is, you know, you go deeper and deeper into like this intensive, that intensive, the other intensive. And then because you start to feel like such a piece of shit, you know, you go to intensives where, you know, the entire intensive is just looking at your weaknesses and you think that's okay. You start to think, well, that's what's necessary. You know, that's what I have to do. And I liken it to some religions, you know, where you have to like go and mine for your sins. Yeah. You know? And there's no way out because you're a sinner. You're screwed, you know, and it's the same thing. It's just it wasn't called sin. It was called a breach, or it was called, you know, some kind of a weakness, or you didn't have enough strength, or you didn't have enough courage, or you didn't have enough bravery. And so it's this never-ending cycle of examining yourself and getting caught in these loops inside yourself. And, you know, this is the most important thing to do. And like I've been in a few groups. I won't name some of the others, you know. I don't have the money to defend myself against the attacks that would come. There's always something wrong with you, and it they say it can get fixed, but it can never get fixed because the target always moves, you know.
Right. It's they create the problem and they offer the solution, but the solution
Exactly.
never really fixes the problem that they created. I love that you brought up religion because as you're talking, I'm like, yep, I went through that. Yep, because I come
Right.
from Mormonism,
Right.
and the whole you're never worthy enough. You always have to pray for forgiveness after every night. And I'm like, what am I asking for forgiveness for? I didn't do anything wrong, but you start to make up things that you did wrong.
Totally.
I'm curious about, I mean, you're such an intelligent, strong personality. I could imagine that at some point when they were trying to break you down, you must have had a little voice in your head that says, I don't know if that's really true about me, or I don't know if I want to submit to this breaking down. Do you remember having any of those instances?
I did. Nancy Salzman, the second in command, was somebody that was assigned to me. She was a very, very smart woman. She's in prison too. And she was a master NLP practitioner. And I fought a lot. You know, I said that the first, few months that I was taking trainings, I was like, that's bullshit. That doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. That, this. And she had a way of getting into me where I think it was day 3, I walked into her office because she was running the training as well with some other high-level trainers. They brought in the big guns because I was there because they figured, okay, this is the what the bleep guy. We're going to bring the big guns. And I walked into her office and I said to her, something's not right here. And she goes, what? And I said, I don't know. You guys are so nice. There's an ulterior motive. And she's like, oh, what's the ulterior motive? I said, well, I don't know, but something's not right here. Something's not right. And that was day 3.
Yeah.
And she said, well, why don't you bring this up tomorrow again? Let's come back to my office tomorrow and let's have this discussion. Because she knew that tomorrow morning there was a module. There was going to be an in-depth discussion about projection, about what you project on other people, which is basically they told you whatever you project on other people is you. So I go through this intensive, and the whole this module and the entire thing is about getting you to realize that the things you think are happening in other people's heads are not necessarily, but they're happening in yours. You're having those thoughts. You're that person. Complete engineered internal gaslighting. And so when I heard that, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be open to this. When I heard that, I thought, shit, is it possible that I'm the one with bad intent? Maybe I do have bad intent. Maybe I do have ulterior motives. Because the problem is, and I think that anybody who's ever been devout or whatever, it feels good to search yourself for the truth. And the problem is they tell you what the truth is and you go, well, maybe that is true. So there was that moment. And then as the intensive went on and I went deeper and deeper into the educational model, and the educational model was very interesting. For someone like me, it was really fascinating. There was intensives called, civilization and breaches and anatomy of the mind body and patterns and traps and stories and like a really incredible stuff where you'd look at like the pattern of how you make decisions, and what triggers you. And it's like really, really cool stuff. But I remember as the intensive went on longer and longer, there came a point where Nancy Salzman said to me, you're wasting your time here. And I go, why? She says, because you're fighting everything. You're not willing to just try it on and to just allow yourself for a moment to see, is it true? You're so busy saying, fuck it, it's not true.
Oh, wow.
And I remember this moment of thinking, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm a belligerent asshole. So maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Okay. And I remember walking into the training room door. And this was late into the training. This must have been, I don't know, more than 10 days into the training. And I walked into the door and I thought, okay, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to put down my insistence on being right, my, pride of my intelligence. I'm going to put it down. And I'm going to walk through this door and be a fresh human being taking information in. And I walked through the door and I just put it all down. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it. 12 years later, when I woke up, it happened in reverse. I was like, holy shit. I went to sleep when I walked through that door.
Oh, wow.
That decision I made, I went to sleep.
Yeah.
And all my normal alarm bells and fuck you and you're an asshole and you're lying all just dissipated.
Right.
Not completely, but a big portion of it. And it's like I went into some kind of like slumber, this weird coma. And then 12 years later, when I came out, I thought, fuck, that was a pretty big moment, And what I was trying to do was I wanted so desperately to overcome my fears and my phobias and my angers and my everything. And I thought, I'm so tired of being the way I am. Okay, fine. I'll do whatever to change. Because for much of my life, I'd been in these different groups and different things where it's like, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You got to perform better. You got to do that. So I was desperate to get over myself, as though myself was a problem.
Yeah.
Much later, I realized there was nothing wrong with me.
Right.
Nothing. But you get convinced, especially if you're a devoted, devout person, with a certain, goal and aim, and you've been fed a whole bunch of religious bullshit your whole life.
Yeah.
Up to that point, you're kind of a sucker for it.
Right.
Mark, when I hear you talk about your experience or I watch The Vow, the main thing, one of the main questions that stands out to me is, what does the back end look like for the people, the Nancys and the Keiths that are building this thing? Like, first off, what is Nancy's goal? Because I know for Keith, it's clearly to be the narcissistic leader. He's going to have his sex followers eventually, people worshiping him. But what does Nancy get out of it going into building something like this? And do you think that they get together before this even starts to contemplate what building a cult could look like? How does this happen?
Conspire? Or do you think she really didn't understand what was going on?
She didn't understand what she was building. But you see, the thing about leaders like Raniere, they are very good at seeing the different pathology and the issues of people. So if somebody is desperate for love and attention, like Nancy was, he gave her power.
Yeah.
And I think she loved it. And so that's what I think she held on to for a long time, is I think she really believed she was changing lives. But there was a level of cruelty that she displayed at times. She loved power. I mean, I remember, and I said this in my statement to her in court, there was a moment during that very first intensive, she took me out for breakfast and she just laid into me. She was screaming at me in this breakfast joint, kind of a nice breakfast joint. She was pushing up against what she says was my profound arrogance and pride. And that I think I know more than Keith Raniere. How delusional. She's yelling at me. And she would later say to everybody, I broke Mark Vicente. And she did. And I thought about that, and I said to her in court, I said, you really need to think about, what does it mean that you walk around with glee saying, I broke Mark Vicente? What is wrong with you?
Right.
That you think that's good, But there's this, I think she lived in this delusional world of anything for the spiritual path. If you break a person, it's okay because you're breaking their ego.
Right.
And this is the slippery slope of these leaders. They say, well, you need to break the human being to make them into a god. Yeah, it's very convenient, you shouldn't have an ego. An ego is actually a very healthy thing. Definition, boundaries, sense of, it's a very, very good thing. But the way she spoke about it, I think she loved power. And she told that story again and again and again and again and again, how she broke me.
How did that make you feel when she's telling that story over and over? Were you accepting of it, or did you feel a little pushback every time she mentioned it?
I hated it when she said it. I think that, when you start to get into these systems, and especially a system that has ranking, sort of like the military, at a certain point, you're not going to tell the general they're full of shit anymore.
Right.
Because now you're in this sort of military structure. And I never liked it, but I felt that to be humble, I should just take it. And I think a lot of people were like that. You got to be humble. So you just take it. You take the hits, and you don't realize what it's doing to you over time. Part of me felt, well, I deserve it. And then another part of me, but I couldn't even admit the other part. The other part was I hated it, but I couldn't admit that I hated it.
Right.
I feel like there's two versions of us, when we go into these systems of control and coercion. There's this part of us that's feeling things honestly that has to constantly repress the honesty. because if we don't, there's all kinds of consequences. There's punishment. And there's also like, if you push up against the system, they will destroy you. My exit, we all planned our exits, very carefully. I had to be very strategic in my exit because I knew they were coming after me.
Oh, wow.
When I made the decision that I was out because I was discovering what he was really doing, even the first, culty programmer I spoke to said to me, "Do you have evidence on crimes?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're going to need it because they're coming after you."
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
shit.
That is terrifying. That is absolutely terrifying. And I would love to get into how high your rank was so that people understand how big of a deal it was for you to leave. Because Keith essentially asked you to uproot your life and move to where he was so that you could go on 3 a.m. walks. You could document every single thing that he's doing, which I have to laugh now because I feel like Keith may not have been taken down if it weren't for you recording everything, and we wouldn't have the vow if it weren't for you. So
it's ironic.
It's so ironic.
His narcissism is what led to his demise.
Yeah.
So ironic. So ironic. When I came in, I was just like a coach, like everyone else, and they seemed really. Actually, I wasn't a coach at first, and I wasn't intending to be a coach. And they said, in order for you to get the higher curriculum, you need to be a coach. I was like, oh, shit. Oh, okay, fine. I'll be a coach. And in order to be a coach, I have to enroll people. I go, fine, I'll enroll people. And then in order to get to higher and higher levels of the curriculum, I had to work my way up what they call the stripe path, which is like a martial arts belt system. I just put my mind to it because also I'm very, very motivated. And I thought, well, I want to get that piece of information that's available in that training. And I have to be like an orange sash to get that, and then I have to be like a green if I want to open a center, so I thought I'm going to work towards those things, but the whole ranking system was weird because sometimes it was based on, and look, there were some things that theoretically were amazing. Like in order to get to a certain rank, you had to have an understanding of your pattern. And then to get another rank, you have to have a way to come up with a plan to address that pattern. All things that are kind of amazing. But then there was if you were loyal, when shit hit the fan, because, years before there was what's called the NXIVM 9, there were these 9 women that basically said, this is bullshit, and they left. And Raniere and his legal people went after some of them for years. And I stayed loyal, and my loyalty was rewarded by let's give him a promotion kind of thing. And they knew at that point, because Sarah and I were building, our organization together, they knew that I wanted to get a center going, with Sarah. So they finally, gave me the green sash, which meant now I could actually go and open a center. So I got to green, and there's the way it works is, it's white, which is a student, yellow, which is a coach, orange, which is a proctor, green, which is a senior proctor, and then there's many, many levels above, but people that only achieved senior proctor, counselor, senior counselor, and then the great vanguard. And Nancy Salzman was the prefect. So I worked my way up to that level, but because I started to spend time in Albany, because basically I was thinking, I'm going to get the holy grail of this guy's information. And he did some really interesting things. You talk about, cycles of narcissistic abuse. So I get to, finally, Nancy says, if you really want to learn this shit, you need to move here. I'm like, fuck, fine. I'll give it a year. So I give it a year. And for a year, I'm pestering Raniere. Okay, when are we going to start working on show me how to make movies? When are we going to do this? And he's just not paying attention to me. And I'm like, this is so weird. And eventually on my birthday, he calls me at 6:45 a.m. He says, let's go take a walk. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is it. And he takes a walk with me and he says, okay, here's my idea for a film. And I think, finally, we're going to work on this.
Yeah.
And so it feels like this feeling of finally I'm getting this reward, right? And then I begin writing everything down. I begin recording him, writing everything down, turn it into a treatment for a film. And I send it to him, and his sidekick, Pam Kafritz, who's now gone, she died. She says to me, he loves it. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. So I go have a meeting with him. He loves it. That was the last time he loved anything I did.
Oh, wow.
Because then it was years of picking apart, every draft of everything I did, And you sort of see it in the vow because there's a moment where he's giving me feedback, in the editing room. That was common.
That was one of the more heartbreaking parts for me. Where you were so ready to show him your labor of love, and he was just knocking it down. And yeah, that was a tough scene.
Yeah, that was hard. So basically, I got to the point that they wanted me on the executive board, and I was running various centers. And the other thing that was interesting was, which I realized wasn't true, but I think I thought it was true. Pam Kafritz, was an heiress, a very wealthy heiress that he got under his clutches like 30 something years before. Very wealthy. And she says to me one day, she says, he doesn't have very male friends. I think you're his only male friend. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. So I begin to think like that's true.
Yeah.
And he basically intimates that that's true, which is not true. He just generally didn't get on with men very well. And I begin to think, oh, well, maybe we do have some special kind of, I guess, bond of some kind. And it was weird because I guess I saw him like the older brother, the wiser older brother, but I was terrified of him as well, which I couldn't admit. And in the vow as well, I think I mentioned at one point when I'm in the gym, I say to him, I have suppressive thoughts about you. And he says, what, you mean you want to kill me? I go, no, I want to get away from you because I was creeped out. The logical part of me said, well, that's illogical that you're creeped out.
Yeah.
This man has a lot to offer. Why would you be creeped out? Because what was going on is that your instinct starts to go offline. Your gut goes offline. And you start to think, and you're told that those gut feelings you're having are your limitations that need to be rooted out. And Nancy and every single high-ranking woman around him would say to me, if you're having a problem around him, you have suppressive issues because you shouldn't have a problem around him. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I mean, I guess I got to figure out what's going on with me. It's sort of like people may not realize when you have a lot of people just saying the same thing again and again and again, it becomes part of the culture. You start to believe it. And the other thing that happens, when you go into a new social situation, especially when you're younger, you don't know what the rules are. So you kind of keep quiet for a while. Mm-hmm. And you figure out, like you go to a new school, you figure out what the rules of everything are. And you start to buy into those rules, who's in, who's out, this kind of thing. And I think that's what happens in these kind of situations. Like I started to see the way they treated him with such a deference. And I thought, well, I can't see it, but like, okay, maybe he's great. Because at first I was like, I don't know what the fuck the big deal is, But the way they treated him, I was like, I must be missing something.
Right.
The emperor has no clothes, but I was dressing the emperor in my mind.
Right. And that's one thing that you mentioned in your What is a Cult video, doctrine over person, which I find so relatable. The amount of times I've heard the gospel is true, but the people aren't perfect for Mormonism. I just want to pull my hair out because you detach the person at the top, but the thing is, you can't detach the person from the top. They're the ones creating the doctrine. So you really can't do that. But it's such a good way to make people give allowances to Keith, or, he's not perfect. And even Keith himself, I never claimed to be perfect. I've never claimed, he has a certain level of humility that makes you think, well, yeah, he's not narcissistic. Yeah. He even says that he doesn't know all of the answers. What was your opinion on Keith? Like, especially now that you have this new perspective, how can you kind of analyze his behavior as a cult leader?
Listen, very, very strategic, some of the stuff he did. I mean, I didn't think he was much of a big deal until I started having breakthroughs in the curriculum, because then Nancy say, and this is from him. Right. He's the mind that created this. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then about 10 days into my first intensive, I sat down with him to have a chat at Nancy's house. And it was like a long chat. I think it was like 5 hours. All these chats seems to be 5 hours. And it blew me away because the guy was thinking circles around me. And so I went from it. When I first saw him, I thought, this guy's like a schlub. I mean, this is it. This is the guy. Okay. But then I thought, okay, well, don't be materialistic. Just because somebody looks a certain way doesn't mean, don't be like this intellectual racist. Stop it. So I go, okay. What he did that was so strategic is he acted humble, but he had everybody else prop him up all the time.
Right.
And he would punish them if they didn't.
Oh, wow.
Like at one point, I remember years later, he would say to me, we all agreed that we needed to give tribute to anything important in our life. And he would say things like, you know, if a person's out of a scale of 0 to 10 and a person's at 5, you know, you can give them tribute like to 6. But he said, I'm in the eyes of the world, I'm at a negative 10. So sometimes what one needs to do is go positive 10 to try to fight and combat the way the world sees a person who's so maligned. And I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. You know, a lot of things I think back and say, it did not make sense. So everybody around him was trained to constantly, you know, kiss his ass, because if they didn't, they would be seen as there's something wrong with you. There's some kind of a suppressive instinct or impulse in you. So everybody was deifying him. And I began to do the same thing, but it's interesting, you know, I was thinking back, I did a TED Talk back in 2000 and maybe 11 or 12 or something in Mexico. And I mentioned his name. And I was thinking back that every single time I mentioned his name in public, I flubbed his name.
Really?
Because I think something inside me was like, I did not want to be forced to deify this man in public, you know.
Yeah.
But I felt forced, but I always messed his name up because I tripped over myself, you know. And I somehow separated inside of me like what I was feeling and then what I was thinking, what I was told I should think. So the smart part of it was the way he got other people to basically say things about him. Like he wouldn't say, oh, I was a concert level pianist at blah, blah, blah age. Somebody else would say it. He wouldn't say, I'm one of the top 3 problem solvers in the world. Somebody else would say it. He didn't say, I'm in the Guinness Book of Records. Somebody else would say it. Mm-hmm. He didn't say judo champ and blah, blah, blah. Everybody else was saying it all the time because he had started a mythology before you got there, and everybody was upholding the mythology. You know, I mean, you can see it like the way people talk about, I don't know, political leaders, you know. They almost deify them, and you go, oh my God, they must be amazing. You don't know, you've never met them, you know, but everybody's like, oh my God, you know, or like actors and actresses and, you know, like big movie stars. Some of them are assholes, you know.
Yeah.
Ask film crews know.
Yeah, for sure.
But the world sees these people like they fart roses.
Yeah.
No, they're assholes. Not all, but there's a lot of assholes out there, you know. But this mythology is going now, and it's like this mythological train that's moving so fast. If you stop and say, well, there's a problem, like you're fucked.
Right.
They're going to scrutinize you. And that happened to me. Like when I pushed back on something once, and the executive board met with me every day for like 2 weeks. You know, it's this whole like these what I talked about in my video, these struggle sessions, these confession sessions, you know, getting to the root of why you're resistant.
Do you remember what it was that you said?
I was pushing back because that film, the film I was making, that you saw in the vow, I remember getting upset because he'd suggested something, and he very strongly, and I said it's bullshit. And it didn't go well. And I was like thinking, well, it's because he said it and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And man, that just, how can you say do you not know who you're working with? Like, you've been here how long and you still don't know who you're working with? Every time you pushed against something, I remember at one point towards the end, and there's a recording of this in the vow, where I say to him, all these women that are in this ethicist program are doing terribly, you know? And I thought we were promoting goodness. And he says, well, if you don't know that by now, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, oh yeah, no, you know? Like everything was constantly turned around on you. That's why I also talk about in that video of mine, like this Darvo, you know?
Yes.
They just constantly turn everything around on you. Every problem you have with God or the disciple or the whatever, and I'm, you know, mixing the metaphors here, but like, is terrible.
Yeah.
You cannot question God. And it's the same impulse, and it's protected. People protect this need to worship, you know, and you kind of get caught up in that. And it was interesting as I was thinking to myself yesterday, you know, quietly with the people you could talk to, you were like, you would say things like, I don't know, this seems a bit messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, the tech's great. We're really helping people, but this thing here, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
So relatable. It's the same thing with
Yes.
Mormonism. I mean, we could draw parallels all day, but when people get to the temple ceremony and it's super culty and really weird and no one prepared them for it, and they're just like, this is kind of weird, but they don't really dare say it because it's supposed to be the most sacred thing that you can do in Mormonism. And then by the time you get to that level, you're so invested that you can't just turn away. And if you did turn away, it would be seen as, well, you just don't understand God's work, or you don't understand the way.
Yes.
And it's so... It's so devious because they put the weirdest stuff at the top. And that's what I want to get into next is the weirdest thing. And the weird isn't even the right word. The most damaging thing that Keith Raniere did, and what you eventually came to understand was happening, and what kind of helped you leave through your wife, Bonnie. What, if you could explain to people what he was doing behind the scenes that made NXIVM so awful, and why he's in prison now.
Yeah. So there was this ideology that was present and got more and more intense as you went along, that you needed to humble yourself to truly grow. And at one point, I remember him saying to me, I think it's even in the vow, he says to me and Bonnie, he says, if you would just spend some time with me, here, and like really like get into a program. But, one thing you can't do is you can't attack me. You're going to get very mad at me. And what he wanted a kind of obedience. And you were taught that your pushing back against something like this was an indication of your own pride. So that was the on-ramp. And so what was happening, unbeknownst to many of us, starting in about 2015, although it had happened before, we just didn't realize, starting in 2015, is he was using the women's movement that he created and he taught to basically form a master-slave organization where he was the master above all of them, and then there was submasters that had slaves. And the whole idea was, like, right out of 1984, slavery is freedom. To truly, truly be obedient is how you find freedom. And that's kind of like, okay, maybe, but where it gets really, really messed up is, in order to become part of this weird master-slave MLM, the women had to give collateral to demonstrate that they would not talk about it and would be obedient. And the collateral was rough stuff. It was like, sometimes it was access to bank accounts. It was confessions of things that they did or didn't do. It was naked pictures. And when I mean naked, not like, oh, I look cute, like naked, like pornographic, legs open, genitalia naked, that kind of naked. Stuff that you would never want anybody to see, so that if you broke your vow, that could be released and shown to the world, and some of these women were having to confess to things they never did. They would have to confess to, like, well, my father molested me, or my father raped me, or like shit that didn't happen. And so that's what was kind of going on underneath. And then he was starting to have these ceremonies where the women were being branded with the special symbol, like right next to their crotch. I mean, really, really close. And what they found out later is, when Sarah, my business partner, when she finally sent me a picture of her brand, I said, Jesus Christ, it's his initials. She was like, yeah. So he had this messed up fantasy of wanting to be in complete and utter control and master over all these women. And it was called DOS. I can't remember the Latin name. But he wanted to be master of all these women, and it was getting very dark. He was creating dungeons and cages and, getting like whips and a whole bunch of, fucked up stuff. And then he was having some of these women, recruit very young, young girls, young sort of, 15, 16-year-old girls. Now, the thing is, none of us knew any of this. What I did see, and this is, what Bonnie and I saw, and a few of us saw, was that all the women that were closest to him were looking emaciated. Like Alison Mack, her skin was translucent. And at one point I walked with him and I said, I'm very concerned about Alison. He says, why? I said, because she looks terrible. I mean, she looks like translucent. She looks like she's, in a concentration camp. And he says, well, she's still getting her period. In my mind, I was like, what? First of all, I was like, how do you know she's still getting her period? And I thought, okay, so maybe she's telling him everything. But it was such a weird thing to say. And so that we saw like these women are miserable. They don't go anywhere. They can't have relationships. Mm-hmm. They can't have children. They're angry, and they're so skinny because they're living on 300, 400, maybe 500, calories a day, which is like, wow. I mean, you're going to die, so they couldn't think anymore.
Yeah.
And I saw a kind of fervor, a religious fervor in some of them. And I thought, I've seen this before. This is not good. And I challenged him on this a lot, and he always it was mental jiu-jitsu, with me until, finally I started to get evidence of what was going on. And that's when the dam burst. But I didn't know what was going on. I just thought something's not right. You see, the other thing is everybody said this guy was a renunciate. He renounced all material, everything. He didn't have a house, didn't have anything. He said to me, I sleep on couches. He had a few houses, actually. All these women had comfy little places for him. But so for the longest time, I thought, oh, dude doesn't have sex, okay, well, I guess he really is a renunciate. And then much later, towards the end, he says to me, I have to have sex a lot. And
oh.
What? Record scratch? And I said, why? And he goes, because it's like I start to sort of get very light and slight, and it's like I'll evaporate, like, what? He says, I start to like detach from the world, sex grounds me. And I'm like,
what?
Uh-huh. So then like in the last year, I'm thinking, so that one is actually his partner. Okay. So Barbara Jeske, somebody who died under his medical care. She died. And when she died, he said, it's like I lost a wife. And I was like, I didn't know that she was your wife.
Whoa.
I didn't see, I wasn't going to, this is some fucked up, polygamy bullshit. I was just like, okay, so lifestyles, it's okay. Yeah. I went to drama school when I was, in South Africa, and I spent a lot of time in Hollywood. I'm like, what? Everybody has their lifestyle. Okay. And again, if you want to have that kind of lifestyle and you're not coercing people, great. Mm-hmm. But he was coercing people in the most terrible ways. And that's, this was the information that finally I got access to. When I realized what he was doing, I mean, my rage knew no bounds.
Wow. And so obviously something like this woke you up, and I think it would wake most people up. Although some people are still standing outside the jail and like waving to Keith, which blows my mind.
Yes.
But when you were able to hear this information after what I believe is Bonnie consistently being like, Mark, wake up, Mark, wake up, Mark, wake up. And then you hear the totality of it and realized and kind of snapped back into place. What's going through your mind? Like, take us through what happened. Did you go and talk to Keith? Did you blow up at him? How did you react to this?
I mean, it took a few weeks because Bonnie kept on pushing me about stuff. And I was like, I couldn't really handle it, because it didn't make sense to me. And then at one point she said to me, what will it take for you to listen to what I'm saying? And I said, give me evidence. She said, okay. And
smart.
So smart. Because, when you're in this it's sort of like a military mindset. It's like, I don't want to know about like vagaries. I want evidence, very, very like militaristic mindset. So she said, okay, great. So she connected me with a woman that I knew. And this woman told me a story about her being invited into some kind of sorority, and that she had to give naked pictures and confess to crimes and everything from another woman who was a lawyer. And I was like, what? This is messed up. And I had no reason to disbelieve her because I listened to her story and it was incredibly compelling. And Keith's name wasn't mentioned in it, but I was thinking, okay, so there's some group of women that are blackmailing each other. That is fucking bad.
Yes.
And so I began talking to other women. And, Bonnie was sort of just standing there, like watching me sort of take it all in. I'd have conversations with these women. I'd come back and I'd go, oh, shit. And she never did like I told you so. And these women were terrified because they had collateral hanging over their head, collateral that could destroy them, So I remember at one point I called Keith up and I said, I'm very concerned about things I'm hearing. And he says, what are you hearing? I said, I'm hearing about some secret society, women that are being blackmailed, blah, blah, blah. And it's a real problem. And he says, oh, well, I mean, I'd have to investigate. I said, what do you mean you have to investigate? You know about it.
Mm.
He goes, and I realized motherfucker's lying to me.
Ooh.
Motherfucker's lying to me. And so that's the first time I realized that he just lied to me.
Yeah.
But what happened is when that door opened of he just lied to me, I began to go, how many other lies are there? And then the possibility was there like, oh, there could be a lot of lies. And he was, doing like gaslighting me and mental jiu-jitsu and like, well, this and that. And, people imagine things. I said, okay, well, maybe I'm crazy. And he goes, no, I'm not saying you're crazy. But I didn't understand yet that I was talking to somebody truly evil. I didn't get that part yet. As things went on, and as I realized he was lying to me, I realized like I'm in a very bad position here. Because like this guy knows everything about me. And now I have to pretend that I'm not that perturbed. And I was deeply perturbed. I mean, I was already calling the FBI, the DEA. I was making a lot of phone calls to law enforcement. In this whole escape that we did, we each had a job, and Bonnie's job really was just waking everybody up.
Yeah.
She was the fire starter. And, Sarah was like, she was the one, we all spoke about it and we just said, look, you have to go public. You have to show your brand. And it was very hard for her to do that. And I said, but people need to see this. They need to see, and they need to see the raw picture and the healing picture. And we need to get you to doctors and we need to get you to, while it's crazy what was happening in the beginning of June, the end of May, 2017, Sarah was going to Albany and I was setting up an appointment with the FBI in Albany. And I was like, we were doing all this shit to get her to the FBI while everybody was thinking she was just going to, there was so much stuff that was going on. When I truly understood that he was the architect of all of this, there was a kind of crack in me. And it's something that I spoke about in my What is a Cult video. What these people do is they mirror your dreams, your yearnings, the essence of what you want in your life so completely that you feel like they get you better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So for me to question him would mean I'd have to question my own goodness.
Yeah.
And who wants to do that?
Yeah, your whole identity is wrapped up in it.
Your whole identity is wrapped up. And I just remember having this realization that he was a truly, truly evil motherfucker. And then the next thought in my mind was, I need to jump off a building. And this other part of me was like, what are you saying? So there's two of me here. The one is in full suicidal ideation. And the other one is like, dude, you've never, ever thought this thought before. There is a huge, huge problem. And this other part of me goes, I think there's a problem. It's weird. There was a split. The reasonable me and the psychotic me. And I just unraveled that day. I just lost my shit. And it was a few days, and I was talking to an exit counselor and like a whole bunch of things, and I needed a lot of help. And Bonnie was amazing. Because she'd already been through this horror, and now I was going through the horror. So she just, she was with me. She just held me. She understood exactly what was going on.
Right.
But the way I describe the waking up, the best way I can describe it to the horror is there are two things. The one is, like, you remember in Stranger Things, the upside down? Mm-hmm. I woke up on the upside down thinking, oh shit, I thought this was the right way up. This isn't the right way up. This is not the right way up. And so I flipped to the proper world and thought,
wow.
What have I been doing? What have I been doing? What have I condoned? What have I been part of? And it was such an injury to everything I care about that my rage just went off. And it was like, I'm burn this motherfucker to the ground. Because eventually what happened is we realized, we can't try to convince everybody. We may just have to to basically burn the entire organization to the ground so they have nothing to hold on to, which, by the way, many of them are still upset at us for. Many of them still, even the ones that realize he's a bad guy, won't talk to us, because we destroyed Eden. That moment of waking up was, and I honestly, I don't recommend it to anybody, but it's essential. When you wake up, especially, it's different if you wake up and you realize, these people were full of shit. But when you realize, like, they weren't only full of shit, this guy was doing terrible, evil things to people's bodies and their psyches. He was stealing the childbearing years of these women. He was stealing their ability to love again, to really have bonding. I mean, some of these women are very fucked up still, and they probably will be for a long time. And they're getting as much therapy as possible, but it's terrible what he's done to them, because the thing with this kind of abuse, which is not only narcissistic, but psychopathic abuse, it really affects your ability to love again, to have bonding again, to believe, to trust, things that are really important, for the human beings as social creatures.
Yeah.
It's a really, really big thing to go through. And I was thinking the other day, the way that somebody's woken up is they go through that horror. If they just go like, I can see how that's a problem, they haven't truly woken up. When a person wakes up, it's like they wake up in a different planet, and they're trying to figure out, like, what planet am I on? Who am I? Where am I? What happened? And that horror actually fueled me for a number of years.
Yeah.
I was determined, and that got me through a number of years of shooting the vow, and then the trial. And the trial was horrible. I hated it. The trial was terrible. The trial was, I mean, we were all up against him and his 5 lawyers, just like trying to decimate us, and just lying.
Yeah.
I have so many opinions about the legal system, by the way, so many. Like, how are they allowed to gaslight you when they know they're lying?
Right.
How is that allowed? When, like, the person on the stand has to swear in the Bible and the whole thing, and, like, go to prison if you lie. Motherfucker over there in the $2,000 suit lies as much as they want.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I sidetrack, something I'm still angry about.
No, absolutely. I mean, we just went to the Danny Masterson trial for the Scientology, that whole thing. And Jonathan and I are both like, this is mind blowing. So yes, we have opinions too. But one of the things that's so hard about the waking up process is it comes with such a level of shame that you just can't believe it. You're like, I can't believe I fell for that. And hindsight's 2020, and you're looking back and you're like, how did I believe that? But the thing is, there's so much shame because they conditioned you to feel that way. So especially in your situation where you're talking about having those negative feelings were considered something is wrong with you, you're having these negative feelings and also having to process the fact that nothing is wrong with you while you're having these negative feelings. It's just so much to unpack. And I can imagine when you had to watch The Vow, it must have felt like a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, you can clearly see for the first time what was going on. And on the other hand, you're probably thinking, what the hell? How did I fall for that? What was it like for you watching The Vow?
I was very familiar with, pretty much everything in The Vow. So it wasn't a surprise, but it was, I got to step outside for a moment and look in and see myself, as a character. And I will, and I got to tell you, a lot of people were supportive, but they were trolls. They were just mean beyond belief. It really, it astonished me, the level of cruelty.
Wow.
I remember even my friends would say to me, like, dude, you're supposed to be smart. What the fuck? And I go, well, maybe I'm stupid. They go, well, you're not stupid. I go, well, maybe I am. Fuck you,
Right.
The thing that I finally began to understand, though, is, it's not about intelligence, it's they get you emotionally. And if you understand, years ago when I was in South Africa, as apartheid was beginning to fall apart, I was in, film school, like drama and film school. And my buddies got access to a torture manual from the police, like interrogation manual. And I started reading it, and I was reading, it's basically psyops of the mind of what you do to somebody. You scare the shit out of them, not just with what you do to them, but what they think you're going to do to them. And I was like, it's you don't stand a chance against the people that have written these kinds of books and people that are doing these things. People don't understand that anybody can fall for this shit.
Yeah.
Anybody, doesn't matter. It's not about smart. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's they get you emotionally, and I did have a lot of shame. I had a lot of shame. Oh, I think part of what helped was my determination to put this guy away was so powerful, and it was fueled by rage and shame. Because I felt like this shit happened on my watch. All right, motherfucker.
Game on.
I'm going to make this right.
Yeah.
Now, you can't ever make it right, but you can do as much as you possibly can. And I became like this soldier, hell bent. I would do whatever legally I could to make sure that nobody could get hurt again. And that was my mission. It was like, make sure nobody can get hurt by this motherfucker ever again. That helped me to some degree. But then also, I think, I started to, as I sort of reintegrated myself back into the normal world, and I was looking at, media and looking at, politics and seeing the things people were falling for, my shame kind of started to fall away. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people that believe that thing over there, and that thing, that thing's a lie, or this thing's this. So, because, also being in media, you understand that like a lot of what you see on television is all just, it's a show.
Yeah.
And people fall for it. And I was like, yeah, this is a very human thing, So a lot of the shame fell away, but the shame at first was so profound. So profound. I hated myself. I hated myself. How could I not see this? How could I not protect these people? I didn't know what I was looking at, So somehow I got to make this right was me trying to fix what I didn't see,
Yeah.
So it was a very, I was so driven. And there's consequences for that kind of thing too. I mean, I remember walking out of the trial when they found him guilty. A lot of people were celebrating, and I remember one of my friends who was working on the vow said to me, "How do you feel?" And I go, "I feel awful." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because there's just bodies everywhere. I just see bloodshed everywhere. There's so much pain."
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was so focused on is, okay, great. So he's going to be put away if I ever belong. But like so many people are hurt, and so many people hate each other, and so many people have been shunned, and I was still experiencing the pain of shunning because I've been shunned, still being shunned to this day. 5 years later, since I left, still being shunned, and it hurts.
I think that's incredibly frustrating, seeing that you went into this experience, seeing this as the place of ethics, seeing this as a noble endeavor, wanting to better yourself, wanting to better the world. It's the complete antithesis of what you ended up experiencing. And now that whole 12 years that you were offline, which is crazy to think about, that you were just off that whole time and you had shut your instincts off. But that entire time, they had trained you in such a way where you were gaslighting yourself, self-policing the entire time. So you go through that entire phase. Now you emerge from this angry, frustrated, wanting to jump off of a bridge. And now you go through the phase where now you're being shunned. So it's basically this never-ending journey of just wanting to do good and seeing the complete opposite of that. So I commend you for having gone through this journey, and I'm sorry that you're experiencing all of this.
Yeah, it's gotten better now, but I think the thing, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, like all these beautiful things that we hold dear, when you find out that the thing is rotten, it affects your perception of nobility, of honor, of goodness, of kindness, of compassion, of everything gets affected. And you have to sort of figure out, like, does it all bullshit, or is any of it true? Or, so it took me a long time to reapproach some of these things, to reapproach the idea of honor, because everything was honor, and you're a man, you need to have honor, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, fuck your honor, But then I realized, like, no, I do. There is something about honor I find quite beautiful. What is it? What is it I find, beautiful about it? And like, I've found for me that I'm reapproaching a whole bunch of things now with time that I do value, because everything got kind of poisoned and tainted, Thank goodness love didn't, thank goodness that I have an extraordinary wife that never got tainted. That stayed strong and beautiful. But also, you start to mistrust everything, so it takes time to get these things back. But weirdly enough, I don't know, with some of the projects I'm doing right now, I feel like everything I've been through has uniquely positioned me to understand some of the things I'm looking at now, and dealing with people that have been victimized by, sociopaths and psychopaths, and then dealing with sociopaths and psychopaths, like interviewing them has been weirdly healing, if I could say that, because I never got the opportunity to. Raniere never admitted anything, so I never got to actually have a conversation with him. So now, in a weird way, by proxy, I'm actually talking to people that have malignant pathologies and getting an insight into how their minds work, and it's starting to go like, oh, that's why Raniere did that. Oh, that's why he did that. It's starting to kind of make sense. My art is kind of saving me, and
Wow.
Do you think that you'll ever get a chance to speak with Keith? Have like one final closing statement? Do you even want that?
I don't really want that. He reached out to me 2 years ago, and then through other people, and basically the person said, oh, he wants to talk to you. I go, so what does he want? And they said, oh, he wants you to tell the judge you made a mistake.
No.
Yeah. So I said, you know what? Tell him to go fuck himself.
Yeah.
I actually only ever said, no, I know. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
I can't believe it, but I can believe it.
Yeah. It's profound delusion.
Yes.
And the only thing I've ever said to him publicly was, and then nobody would air it, because it was just swearing, No, I wasn't swearing actually, but nobody seemed to get it. But I walked out of court, and the whole barrage of like cameras that are in your face, and they said, "Do you have anything you want to say to Raniere?" And I think I said, "Yeah, don't bring word salad to a gunfight. Fuck you." Never aired it, but I was like, that's the only thing I've ever said to him publicly.
What I love about that, and what people might not know if they haven't seen The Vow, is that Keith was famous for just putting together a bunch of words and making it sound profound without actually saying anything profound. And
Yes.
so I love
Yes.
that you're like, your final stick it to him, we'll air it here, right on Cults to Consciousness. But I
Yes.
love what you're doing. I love that you are taking your time to educate people about cults, and everyone should definitely check out your podcast. WTF is on my mind. And I have to say, one of my favorite things, and we've used this line before actually on Cults to Consciousness, a line that you said in The Vow: nobody joins a cult, they join a good thing. And one of your final bits of information on your previous video, What is a Cult? You say, I would just suggest everybody examine their life, and if any of these things that I've mentioned may be in your life, you should examine that. And if you are having resistance to examining that, it probably means you should examine that. And I love that so much, because nobody thinks they're in a cult until they realize it.
No. I mean, honestly, when I realized it, I was horrified. I was like, I've been studying this shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been reading about authoritarian regimes and like cults and shit. What?
How did I
I'm
miss
in a
it?
cult?
Yeah.
How did I miss it? But the thing is, nobody trains us. Nobody trains you about, as a kid, like, what a narcissist is, what a psychopath is, what a sociopath is. Nobody trains you about these things. They make you think, well, everybody's good. Mm-hmm. Everybody deserves of this and deserves of that. No, some people, they're not good. They're born a certain way, and at your peril, open yourself up to them. So I think there's an education problem in the world. At the same time, I don't want people to be looking at everybody going, oh my God, that person could be awful. That's not what it is at all. But the signs are pretty obvious. Once you learn what the map is, the signs are very obvious. And what I'm also really trying to do is get people to understand, the covert types as well. Because the overt, grandiose types are very easy to spot. It's the covert types, that are so sneaky. So I'm on quite a mission to educate people right now.
Absolutely. And you actually have a course. And before we get into that and promote all of the wonderful things that you're doing, I want to get your Linda listen moment, your sassy statement to someone who's pissed you off, or some inspiration.
You know, the one thing the one Linda listen thing I keep thinking about, you know, Linda listen, nobody else knows shit about you. Only you know.
Oh, yes.
You know? Like, you know, in there, you know. It's your nervous system. It's your heart. It's your soul. Like, you know, whatever it is, you know, other people don't know.
Linda, listen, follow your instincts.
Yeah.
Linda, listen, follow your effing instincts. Yeah.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap around to your promotion?
I do have one thought, actually, which is, you know, I think, and I've experienced the other end of this, you know, where people judge you for, you know, you fell for something, you got fooled by something.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to, like, instead of separating ourselves from the people that we see on those TV screens that fell for things, instead of separating ourselves, it'd be really good to, like, try to put yourself in their shoes and figure out, like, how could that happen to me?
Yeah.
Is there a circumstance under which that could happen to me? Because as long as you separate yourself from those people that have been fooled, you're susceptible. Because that wouldn't happen to me is a recipe for disaster. Because you're blind. Yeah. Unless you can see how something could, you won't see it coming. You know, and it's good to connect with the human experience instead of pushing ourselves away from other human beings that are going through all kinds of difficulty and confusion and being fooled, you know, by some very sometimes clever strategic people.
It's never obvious. I'll just say that. It's never obvious.
Religion. There are things about religion. I have a lot of issues with religion, but there are things about religion. There's this church in Lisbon that I pop into every now and again. I walk into this church. There's so much wrong with this because, like, the damn church is so wealthy, and these old people with no money are putting money into the little coffers and things. But I tell you, I walk into this church, and there's a feeling of peace and beauty and calm of all the people that for centuries have sat there talking to what they think is God or whatever that is. There's something quite beautiful about this. And so the malevolence is wrapped in sometimes such beauty, such beauty, that it's so hard to see.
That's such a good point. Babe, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Do you think that Keith knew from the very beginning what he was building?
Yeah, I think Keith did know what he was building. But, you know, you have to understand what he was building. One of his favorite books when he was a young boy, he said, was the Foundation series. And he was building his world that he wanted to see. And he would do anything to make it happen. And so he saw all of us like kind of robots that needed to be reprogrammed. What I think his blind spot is that he himself, I don't believe, actually has any empathy. He could calculate empathy. He had cognitive empathy. And so what he was actually doing, I don't think he knew he was doing this, or he might have. He was actually trying to create psychopaths. But mostly what he was going for was a version of the world that he had in his mind where he was God. You know, he wanted to be a god. He would speak of him, you know, he would speak about these great men and women that did extraordinary things, you know, and like he wanted to be that. He wanted to have that kind of worship and obedience from everybody. Because I could never figure out, you know, like I can talk quite a lot, but like I get tired. You know, I can't sit in front of an audience and like after an hour and a half, I'm like, I'm fucking done. This guy could go for hours.
Yeah.
And every cult leader I've ever met can go for hours because they're getting fuel from it.
From the attention.
Because they have a gaping emptiness inside there, and that's the fuel they need. So I think his delusion was, and I don't think he even thinks in terms of, you know, morality. He talks about it all the time. I don't really think I just think he wants the world a certain way and he'll do anything to get it. He wants ultimate control. They all want ultimate control. So I think he always knew what he was doing. I mean, just so you know, this whole DOS thing, you know, this blackmail society, 10 years before, he had dreamed up something called Faust. that he told somebody about, that when I escaped, she told me. And Faust was basically having some of the younger, more attractive women go and seduce and blackmail powerful men in order to get influence in politics.
Wow.
So 10 years before, in 2005, he was already dreaming that idea up, So this is the mind, this is the mind, now he gets to sort of do all his strategy in prison. He's not doing well. I mean, I think he's up against, people that are much worse than him. So
right.
Happy days.
Well, tell everybody what you're up to, where they can find you, your course, your podcast, socials, all the things.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, sometimes on Twitter, but most active on Instagram at Mark Vicente. My podcast is WTF is on my mind. You understand what that stands for, obviously. That's on Apple, Spotify, a bunch of other platforms, and also YouTube. And then I mentioned in my What is a Cult podcast episode, which is actually on YouTube. I really recommend people watch it. It's actually a pretty cool primer. I thought about it a lot. And what I did is I actually took my experiences, other cults I've been in, and a bunch of other survivors, and I spoke to people for a long time. And I sort of put that together thinking, I think this might be helpful, because it's not too heady, a little bit heady, but not too heady. But what I'm going to do is not on my own, but with at least one other clinician, I'm going to do a deeper dive into what is a cult, looking at the psychological aspects of each of these strategies and tactics, what you need to do to defend against it, what you need to do to get out of it, because there are components of our own psychology that are at play in some of these tactics, and we can actually become immune to some of them if we do some internal work. And then the thing I'm most active, I'm doing two projects right now. One is super secret. I can't talk about it. It's a TV series. The other one is this documentary called Empathy Not Included, which I think will be done by the end of this year. I've been working on this for quite a while now. I have an amazing team. And we interview survivors, clinicians, neuroscientists, incredible characters. And we interview self-confessed narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths.
Wow.
And it's coming along pretty amazingly. And I think it's going to really blow people away. And it's been a real labor of love and tough to make, I mean, I've heard some darkness, I think that after these projects, I think I just want to go make a documentary about butterflies or something, it's really sweet and light and, just, it's heavy. It's really heavy, but it's very rewarding because I'm taking all of the pain and all of the confusion and the misunderstanding, all the things I felt, I'm finding and I'm channeling it into making this project with some wonderful people. And everybody who's working on this project has been abused in some way. So everybody who comes on the project goes like, oh yeah, that happened to me. It's my brother, it's my sister, it's my this, it's my that, it's my father, it's my whatever, So it's a very profound healing experience for everybody who's on the crew. That's pretty amazing stuff.
Oh, I love that. We're definitely going to have to bring you back on when that airs so that we can talk about it some more.
Definitely.
But thank you so much for your time, Mark. It has been wonderful. And I love hearing from you and your expertise and your experiences. And I appreciate you sharing that so openly and honestly. And if you liked this episode, everybody, you're definitely going to want to check out the one we did with Sarah Edmondson, the Sarah we've been mentioning throughout this episode. You can click here to see that. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/cults2consciousness. Mark, you have a Patreon as well. Do you want to drop it?
Yes, patreon.com/Mark Vicente.
Beautiful. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.